Hi guys! Today I thought I'd share with you what I do in order to overcome emotional wounds. But first, a story. So, for a few days or so, I've been feeling progressively anxious. And, I just couldn't pinpoint exactly why. Do you get like this sometimes too? Like you're spiraling down in anxiety for no apparent reason? Well, that's how I was. Anyway, I'd wake up feeling angry and anxious and uncertain about the future, and I was plagued with doubts about my work. Thoughts of failing and being a failure became so bad that I found myself unable to sleep no matter how tired I was. I tried to numb myself by playing games on my phone for hours, which is something I never ever do. I just felt so crappy, and I honestly didn't know why. When I thought about it deeply, I finally realized why I was feeling so anxious. Turns out my anxiety had started with a phone call from my mom. So, several days back, before all this happened, my mom had called and said that my cousin wanted to visit the Bay Area, which is where I'm at. But she worried that my cousin won't be able to stay with me because my apartment was too small. Anyway, so my mom then casually mentions that my aunt's daughter is moving into a big house. And then she lets out a loaded sigh, as if to say, "And what are you doing with your life?" I'm usually very good about brushing off comments like this because in my family, I'm sort of the black sheep. I quit my six-figure salaried corporate job and chose to live frugally in order to pursue a more creative, spiritual path that resonates with my soul. And to my parents, who has lived through extreme poverty, my life choices are, bewildering to say the least. But this time when my mom commented about my small apartment and stuff, I felt embarrassed of my situation, and it triggered something in me and created anxiety. How I integrate and release emotional wounds. Usually when things like this comes up, it indicates to me that something deeper is going on. On the surface level, it may look like my mom caused all this. I mean, she's the one who's passing judgments about my life, so it may look like she's the perpetrator, the quote-unquote villain, so to speak. But I've come to see that the way you react is never the other person's fault, even if something they had said had triggered you. The real underlying problem is that there's a sensitive spot in my psyche where if anyone were to brush up against it, it'll flare up. Someone might make the wrong kind of comment at the wrong time, and it'll trigger a downward spiral. So I know with things like this, it's best to get to the bottom of it and find that sore and heal it. Anyway, at this point in the video, I'd like to share with you the steps I take to overcome emotional wounds. Step number 1. Confront the problem. First of all, you have to be willing to explore and confront your trauma. One thing you should know about me is that I don't have a problem confronting problems. I'm, the sort of person who likes to look at problems straight in the eyes and bring clarity to it. But, I've met a lot of people who would rather not confront their problems and would rather ignore or bury their emotional issues. And I asked once why that was, and they said that they fear it'll create a loose thread on a sweater situation where pulling one loose thread is going to undo the whole sweater. In other words, they fear that they'll spiral if they were to start confronting issues, and they won't be able to perform their daily duties. For me, though, I usually have enough space in between my thoughts and myself that spiraling uncontrollably isn't a fear I have. There's a calm part of me in the background that observes and holds the calm energy, which I've come to know and sense through meditation and meditative practices. Step 2. Give empathy and compassion to yourself. If you're willing to confront the trauma, then the next step is to give yourself unconditional compassion. This step is very important. Instead of criticizing, chastising, and blaming yourself, Reassure yourself that there must be a good reason why you're reacting the way you're reacting. You see, even if everyone is against you, you have to be on your side. A lot of times, confusion comes in when you doubt your own reactions, your emotions. You feel like you're in the wrong for feeling upset, angry, or frustrated, and you might say things like, I don't know why I feel this way. I have a theory on why we might feel so confused about our emotions. Growing up, we probably had people telling us that we shouldn't feel the way we feel, that we are overreacting, or that isn't a good reason to be upset. And, over time, I think we might have internalized these opinions. And so as adults, whenever we get emotional, we feel confused and guilty, like we're in the wrong for feeling the way we do. But I've learned that I never react the way I do without a good reason. I might not know how to articulate the reason, and I might even look irrationally emotional to other people. But when I dig deeper, I always find a legit reason. So I always find some time to empathize with my story and assure myself that, of course, if anyone were in my shoes and had my history, they'd be upset too. Step number 3, let yourself vent. Now, if I still have pent-up emotion, that's energy that has to be released somehow. It's unhealthy to hold in energy. If energy builds up too much, it can eventually get expressed in a destructive, toxic way. For example, unreleased energy can manifest through things like eating and drinking issues, depressions, and some of the more destructive things. Now, I don't have kids of my own, but I do have nephews. And one thing I noticed with them is that it's important to give kids the tools to express their emotions so that they don't become physical or do anything toxic to themselves or to others. So the adults help them verbalize their feelings and their emotions and help them vent in a controlled, healthy way. And just like that, I think we need to let ourselves vent too, but of course in a healthy and controlled way. Now for me, my way of venting is I usually do it in the form of writing. Writing really helps me feel heard and to organize my thoughts and emotions. Anyway, the key is to vent with the purpose of releasing pent-up energy. Step number 4, zoom out and get to the bottom of it. The last step is to zoom out and to look at the situation as a whole. This is a time to dig deeper into your history and to look at the situation from an aerial vantage point. When we're emotional, we tend to zoom in and focus on our feelings and the wrong that has been done to us. Now, I'm not saying this isn't okay or like that we shouldn't do that. Actually, I do think that this is more than okay and it's very necessary. But once the emotion drains, you want to zoom out and see the situation more objectively and as a whole. The key is to bring curiosity into it rather than criticism or judgment. Look at your history and the other person's history as well, and use empathy and imagination to see the situation fully. And basically, those are the 4 steps I take when healing my emotional wounds. And that's what I did in this particular situation. I started letting myself vent in my journal. The whole, I hate it when my mom says this, I hate it when she says that, and is she trying to make me feel bad on purpose? That sort of stuff. I wrote it all down in my journal. Then after I calmed down and when I was able to, I zoomed out to see the situation at a different vantage point to gain a more holistic understanding. You see, as a child, I grew up in a low-income household and, we were poor. And the thing that left a scar in me wasn't because of the inconveniences of being poor, but it was the embarrassment and the shame that came with it. My parents were constantly aware of how people judged us and disregarded us because we were poor, and they were embarrassed. And, as a sensitive child, I was fully aware of the embarrassment that adults felt and absorbed it into my psyche. Anyway, I think when my mom commented about my apartment being too small and implied that I looked impoverished in front of my relatives, the childhood wound I had about feeling judged and feeling embarrassed came up. When I realized this, I gave myself a lot of compassion for having lived through something like that. And I told myself that if anyone had lived through what I did, they'd be sensitive about it too. But I also reminded myself that as an adult, living frugally was a choice I had happily made in exchange for freedom for my time. This also means that at any given moment, I can choose to exchange my time for more income by going back to work for a company rather than doing my own independent work. For me, my life situation right now is a privilege, an opportunity, something that I had waited for a long time and had consciously prepared for. It is not a circumstance that I was thrown into, unlike how it was for my parents. But I also understand where my mom is coming from, and I have a lot of compassion for her as well. Her feelings are just as valid because I was there when she was struggling to keep us afloat, so I completely empathize. She has all the right in the world to react the way she did because my life choices were triggering her own trauma. But I also understand that at some level, she feels like she's still there struggling. And it must still feel like that's her reality, even though right now she's financially well off. In conclusion, the truth is, at the end, we're waiting for us, not some savior to come. We are our own parent, our own savior, who is going to validate us. All we need is for us to see ourselves, for us to hear ourselves, and for us to love ourselves. It's usually when we internalize other people's opinions of ourselves that we start to feel bad. So that's why it's important to create space, a boundary between people's opinions and you. Understand that no one, no matter how close they are to you, no matter if they are your parents or your partner or your closest friend, no one knows you completely. They all see you through their lens and their own experience. So when something about you triggers them, that's not your responsibility. But along the same line, something about other people will trigger you too, but they're not necessarily responsible for your reactions either. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed our talk today. Leave in the comments below how you usually deal with your own wounds. What I shared here works for me specifically, but I'm sure we all have something up our sleeves. So let's share and help each other out. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Regards, Ray.